Okay, here we go, y'all. Here we go. Another year with Diverse Talking Heads podcast. Happy New Year's, everyone. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and we have been blessed to see 2024. Can you believe it? 2023 went by almost like that. And now we're looking at least eight more episodes of Diverse Talking Heads podcast for this year. So here we go. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the work contract. Yes, the work contract is broken. We're going to talk about blaming workers. We're going to talk about contract to hire. And yes, we're going to talk about some other nonsense as well. And I do have a team of elite panelists here with me this evening. We will introduce them right now. Please welcome Charlie. Charlie, welcome.
Calvin, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to a great number of podcasts of Diverse Talking Heads in 2024.
Yes, sir. Welcome. Yes. And we also have Kaushal.
Good evening. Thanks for still having me.
Yes, thank you for still being here. And we also have Amy. Amy, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Welcome to 2024.
Yes, indeed. And we have a guest panelist with us this evening. Please welcome Ilya. Ilya, welcome to Diverse Talking Heads.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yes, sir. And we have my man, Dan. Dan, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Calvin, and good to be here with my fellow panelists.
Indeed. All right. Well, let's jump right into it. Let's start with the talk about contract to hire. Let's start with a definition. What exactly is contract to hire? And then we'll talk about some pros and some cons to that. Contract to hire is a short-term job that allows both parties to try out as far as committing to full-time employment. It's also known as temp to hire, where contract to hire agreements typically typically set out the length of time that the contractor will work for the employer. Now, as that end of the trial period comes to a conclusion, the employer has the option of deciding whether to hire the contractor as a full-time employee with benefits. So I'm going to start with Dan. Dan, what are some of the pros to contract to hire?
Okay. I could probably give you a lot more negatives, but I will look for a pro. Like you said, it's a chance to check each other out. I actually like to call it rent to own. So, it obviously developed when the, I think it developed by a lot of employers trying to decide, what kind of employee counts they wanted to have and wanted a certain flexibility around that.
Okay, very good. Any cons? Anybody have any cons to this? Cons to contract to hire? I know Dan has some. That's why I asked you the pros, because I know you had a lot of cons. Does anybody have any cons? Well, I'll give you one. As a former contract to hire employee, you don't have any benefits. If you come from a temp agency, you have to work so many hours, usually hundreds of hours before any kind of benefits will kick in. They're usually not very good benefits and they're very costly to you as a temp employee. So when you get that contract, you don't have any benefits. And the contract may last for, 6 months, may last for 2 or 3 years. During that time that you're working, you don't have any benefits. So that's one con. Anybody else have any pros or cons? Amy, yes.
It's more of a con. Like Dan, I could probably come up with a lot of cons. In it allows folks to sort of date for a little bit before deciding if they're going to make a commitment. A big drawback to that is what are the scope of the work you're supposed to be putting in. I have worked with a number of folks as clients to other organizations who are essentially working full time, as you said, without benefits. They want to impress their employer by being, a good employee so that they can get that full term. But that prohibits them from finding something else that could be a full time. And there's no guarantee at the end that they're necessarily going to get this role that they have worked so hard for. I think it is really mentally taking advantage of someone in a number of different ways, because it really kind of ties your hands behind your back where you're dangling this carrot. You might get this, you might get this. And then at the end of the day, you might have to start all over.
That is true. Very good. Thank you, Amy. Anyone else? Yes, Ilya.
I guess I have to agree with Amy on that point. It's like in the book Who Moved My Cheese? They're moving the cheese every single point as you get hired, and they do promise you that they will hire you to the end until the time comes, and then they'll come with sour face and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, it didn't work out. The company is actually not looking to expand; they're shrinking it, and you will be first to go."
That is true.
And I guess the pros to it, obviously, when you go to be hired at whatever company you're trying to work, you want to put your heart and soul to it because you like what you do, and you feel like there is a possible connection that would lead you to stay there for a longer time period, and you wanted to believe that that connection is last long for a period of time, be that maybe 10 years or until you retired, if you will, only to find out that in a short period of time, like we had just mentioned, in 6 months or 12 months, it comes to the end out of the blue. And the sad part in all of that, the con is they're not looking for an alternative. They will say, "I like you, but I can't be with you anymore." It's like a date. What Amy mentioned just a second ago. Okay, it is like a date. Dating with someone like, "I like you, but I don't want to be with you anymore."
That's true. That is true.
So there is no alternative that they give you. Like, okay, you know what? We don't have a vacancy for this area now, but we do have here. So if you don't mind to, perhaps park yourself here for a while, maybe when something opens up here, we'll hire you. They don't give you those options. Even if they have it, they limit you to what you work, and they see you only as completing that particular space for that moment. And then once it's fulfilled, adios.
That's true. Well, another pro is it can increase your qualifications. By working that temp to hire, you can put that experience on your resume. So that is a definite pro. You can also increase your qualifications and expand your professional network uh, by working in that job. That's a pro as well. But I guess I'm gonna let Dan go for a second here and say, Dan, give us some cons. Come on, I know you're biting at the bit. Give us some cons.
Okay, thank you, Calvin.
Here we go.
Already been some great stuff already put forth. I believe it creates a situation where there's a commitment required of the worker, but not of the employer. You are in perpetual probation, and mistakes are amplified because it's kind of like if you ever sat with somebody who looks for ways to reduce the tip while they're sitting through dinner.
Right.
And oh, they brought it 2 minutes late. It's 3 degrees cooler than I like it. This kind of person's always going to find a reason. My experience with contract to hire is that there is usually no intention of a hire at the other end. It's a carrot. I would rather just have a straight consulting situation and for both sides to be honest about it. I have a friend who's been on a 3-month contract to hire for almost 5 years, and he's still a contractor. So, I know there are situations where they do hire people and they claim it's probation, but do you make a commitment to your workers? Are you going to train them, or are you just going to string them along? And my experience has been that I think it is designed to only benefit one side. Sometimes it benefits the other side, but I think its fundamental design is one-sided.
Okay. And you brought up some very good points, Dan. I'll tell a little bit about my personal situation, a job that I went through a temp agency as a temp worker. And, the carrot that they dangled in front of me was, okay, in 6 months, we're going to decide to take you on or not. Well, as you said, there were some things that happened in those 6 months that made them decide that they couldn't take me on in 6 months and wanted to string it out, another 3 to 6 months. And me being naive to some things, I said, okay. And it actually stretched out more than a year before they finally hired me. Another con that you didn't mention is the salary. I don't think you have a very large negotiating space in that type of environment. Okay. They know what they're paying the temp agency for you. They probably know what the temp agency is paying you. And therefore, they have the option of giving you more than the temp agency is giving you, but not as much as what is actually required or qualified for that position. And they use that to their leverage a lot of times as well to get you on as a permanent employee and not pay you what you should be getting. And let me see, who haven't we heard from yet? Oh, Charlie.
You've not heard from me. I have never been temp to hire, but I have worked in the gig economy for over 20 years at various things. So I'm the guy that never got married, but I slept around a lot, and I'm still sleeping around. So there's at least some good on that. The thought I have when I'm hearing everybody's stories on temp to hire is, oh, there is a tremendous emotional investment you make on that. I mean, obviously, if you have a job and you go in, you get hired, and you have 2 weeks vacation and health benefits and all that stuff, and you go in and you do it, as long as you're not really bad at it, the odds are higher that you're going to be there. But as I think somebody said earlier, it's like you're just have a carrot thrown in front of you, and you're like, you want to grab it, and oh no, let's wait a couple months or whatever, the situation is on it. And it would seem to me that would be got to be an absolutely horrible emotional investment. Of course, depending on your personal situation, what long-term goals you have for yourself, your family, finances, and so forth. And you just mean because you can't think that far ahead. I'm going to be there at least a few more months, but I have no clue if they're going to, hire me or not. I'm personally glad I never was in that situation. I'm still sleeping around, I guess, but and I'm still with the same people. So some have been over 20 years. So
Well,
I'm glad I'm out of that situation. I feel for the rest of you on that.
well, at least you're loyal as you sleep around for 20 years.
Well, yeah, I'm loyal with the people I do sleep with. Yeah,
and,
for what it's worth. Yes.
for what it's worth. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
So, Kaushal, Dan mentioned something a while back, a few minutes ago, about being blamed as a temp worker. You might get blamed for stuff much more than one of the regular employees. It's due to a lot of reasons. Maybe you don't know the rules, or maybe because you're not uh, actually, part of the team. Uh, it's easy to put it on the fall guy or the person that is not there permanently. Do you I should say, what is to you, in your opinion, a blaming culture? in the workplace?
In my opinion, a blaming culture is a way for people to reduce their own stress when something goes wrong or when
Mm,
they're put under pressure. And when you want to reduce stress, you tend to go for what's easy to do, which might be to blame somebody else instead of being accountable for what you could have done to prevent that mishap. And I can see how, even though I'm not very knowledgeable about the subject, I can see how blaming a contractor would be much easier than blaming a full-time employee because it seems to me that there are fewer legal risks for blaming a contractor, and an employer can that is exploiting its contractors stands to benefit from creating a, a list of grievances against a contractor so that they have more grounds to not renew or even outright terminate that contract. So it does seem to me that the divide between full-time work and contractor work does encourage a culture of blame rather than a culture of accountability.
okay, very good. But let's take the temporary worker out of the equation. Now we're just talking about permanent employees and the blame culture in the environment. I also have stories about that as well. But I'm going to ask who's up next? Dan, as far as blame culture in a work environment, is this something that you feel might be on the rise? And what exactly would be a blame culture when it's just employees, full-time
Well, I mean,
employees?
I've experienced it mainly where the manager was a micromanager, couldn't let go. It's a control. It's a control thing. It's a power thing. It's a dynamic of power. So, you can lay the blame on somebody else. I've had this happen to me, where my boss made a mistake and put the blame on me. That happens. I've seen it done, elsewhere. I had a boss once who was such a micromanager. We used to call her J. Edgar Hoover because she kept files on everybody.
Mm,
Uh, so it really comes down to the power dynamic. Um, if the person at the higher level believes that it's going to reflect on them, as opposed to the better managers who fall on their own sword and protect their people, they place the blame on the other person. And nowadays, it's very easy to just dump people at a moment's notice, whether they're, a consultant or an employee. Um, we live in what they call a right to work state. What right to work? It's one of those nice phrases that doesn't mean what it says. So, right to work means that you supposedly can go wherever you want to work, but what it really means is that an employer without any cause can terminate your employment. Um, but it's also a bully situation. So the workplace is the last place that we feel bullying is still allowed. I mean, it still happens elsewhere in schools and things like that, but we're trying to fix that. In the workplace, we're not trying to fix that.
mm.
We still have the power dynamic, and bullies can still find a good place to hide in a lot of especially larger companies.
Yes, they can. Ilya, when Dan talks about the dynamic of power um, and files on everybody, Dan, I think we know the same person. If we're talking about the same person, I would just fall out right now because I had that happen to me. This manager kept files on everybody. Anything you did, any time you spoke in a meeting, she just jotting it down. And when your annual review came up, she'd pull out a file, big fat file, throw it on the table, and she would start going through it and tell you everything that you've done in the last year, the time that you farted, the time that you came in late. 5 minutes late, 3 minutes late, the time that you came back from lunch late. She had all that in that file. And Ilya, don't you think that this would create a environment where people are, well, they have the employees' morale is lower. They're scared to speak, perhaps. What's your thought on that?
I'm so happy you asked me this question. You have no idea. I've been around and I had experienced that myself.
Mm,
The way I see it, in again, it's my personal belief and my view, and being in leadership coaching and training, as you know, many people have been placed in the position of leadership without any lack of skills to that position whatsoever. And they believe that just because they have a title that want to handle, because I have that title. And instead of leading by example and helping and coaching your employees, they do an opposite, exactly what you just both spoke about it. And think about it for a moment. Years ago, I think maybe 2 decades ago, that during the, again, not to get political on that, just in general, Bush's administration, that they said no kids should be left behind. Okay, that was a fact in school. No kids left behind. If they had adapted the same motto for a work environment when they have a new employee or existing employee that's falling behind, something is not working right, but he is a good person, she is a great worker, maybe we should help them sit down, understand what exactly we can help, how we can pull them, how we can pull her by her ears, and help them to get to that level, rather than to just to micromanage and tell them what they did wrong all day long. Okay, I find this is one of the reasons that the new generation of employees, millennials, that don't stick into the places of work, because they don't see value what they're doing it, and they don't see that working together, helping them in any way to strive to the next levels of achievement. Again, that's my personal opinion. That's what I've seen it, and many people that have been placed in the position of that management or leadership positions have been only put into that position because they knew where to kiss. Forgive me, but that's what the truth is, in my opinion.
mm-hmm.
And they knew just the politics, how to leeway around to get to that place. Doesn't mean that it qualified them to be in this position. And I've seen over and over how many great employees have left companies because of that leadership, because of that management, was lack of that uh, ability to create the team environment, to create the unity where everyone actually benefit from coming in and working together. That's
Okay.
again my personal opinion on what I saw.
Okay. Great. So, Amy, when those employees are afraid to speak up because they might be blamed for mistakes and they're afraid to take risks, they're afraid to speak up, doesn't that create more of a toxic environment when employees are like walking on eggshells?
Oh, absolutely. No, I don't know how it couldn't. I think it creates a toxic environment. I think it stifles creativity, which I think organizations tend to really overlook the value of. If you want somebody who is going to come to you with their best self, with their best ideas, they have to feel secure that if they come to you with an idea, you will listen to them. You're not going to, take retaliatory action because you don't like it. They have to feel safe, that, they're not supposed to be towing a line and they might be potentially overstepping it. They have to feel comfortable with their coworkers, that somebody isn't going to go behind them and steal their work and take credit for it, like Ilya and Dan were both just talking about. It's incredibly detrimental. And I think Ilya has a great point. I think there's a lot of people that don't understand how to be managers and think that you doing a good job as a manager is to point out other people's faults, when really I believe it's exactly the opposite. It's to help them feel comfortable in their strengths and to make them kind of rise to be their best self. And saying you were 5 minutes late, or Calvin, like you said, they pull out a file, this is the time that you picked your nose in a meeting, or something like that. Who is that benefiting? Who in the world is that benefiting? It doesn't even look good on the manager, in my opinion.
Very true. Very true. So I have come to find out, and again, this is all because of personal experience, that there's some red flags to bad culture in a company. You know, the way they treat those temps, the way that they play the blame game. But most importantly, if a company doesn't have a list of core values, if it's not posted somewhere, if it's not in that employee's handbook, if they don't have values, and Amy just mentioned values a few minutes ago, then they basically can run rogue, right? There's no rules and regulations that they have to follow because they haven't created any rules and regulations for themselves. Is that true? Kosho.
I would say maybe not the focus shouldn't be on rules and regulations, but on culture and uh, creating a culture of accountability. Um,
Well, well, let's not say rules and regulations, but values.
right, yeah, that's an even better word. Values.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of organizations place too much emphasis on metric-driven performance, and it's really easy to make the metrics look good. It's also really easy to blame someone when the metrics look poor. I used to be in an organization that was quite toxic, that had a blame culture and was metric driven. It's been a long time since I've left that organization, but from what I've heard, even though the managers are different, the culture is still very much there, which really shocked me that even though the managers have changed, that toxic culture, that focus on metrics instead of focusing on people and people's skills, uh, how 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 it just stays and how difficult it is to get rid of.
Okay. So what? Let's talk about the work contract. When I started working, my first job, I was so excited. I spent so many years working on Wall Street, right? Trying to emulate people that didn't look like me, didn't come from where I came from, and it didn't work. I finally realized I had to be me, but me may not work in that environment that well. But I understood the work contract to be okay, Calvin, you're going to work 40 hours a week, and we're going to give you X amount of dollars for that 40 hours pay. Is the work contract broken these days when people are expected to put in more than 40 hours for the same pay, uh, give up personal time for the company, not be compensated, work in toxic environments, go through the things that we just talked about with management? Dan, back to you. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, the contract is definitely broken, and I think it's on the side of the employer that broke it. They broke the trust
Mm,
with massive layoffs, with asking for more without compensation, for lack of where training has been cut. Goes back to Ilya's point, where you'll promote somebody. Phrases like hit the ground running. Well, don't you want to learn your way around first? Shouldn't you have a mentor? Doesn't that make more sense? The adversarial um, way that some workplaces are, the fact that everything is saved for the very top few, and not and the even though the other people are all doing work for them, it's not shared. Um, the the infusion of large money like private equity that just peels off all the pieces and throws the people out of work. The hiring system, we could do a whole podcast on the hiring system, the way it is like beyond broken, where they say there's all these opening new jobs, but they never take them down when they're filled or no longer being used. Um, and these using a lot of pretty words without, you mentioned put it into the employee handbook and those kind of things, but those are just pretty words. That's just HR speak. That isn't implemented. It goes back, Kaushal said it. The culture is where it matters. Ilya had a good point. Train your managers when they move into management so they know how to work with people. They need to understand they're now in a new spot. If you're on a team and now you're suddenly the boss of that team, you're no longer the friends of that team. You're a different place. That you should be helped with that transition and trained, not just go figure it out. And if not, it's on you. So there's a million, I could go on for a long time, which I won't. But there's a lot of different factors where I think the contract was broken from the employer side. And to Ilya's point, millennials figured it out first. Gen Z and others are figuring out also. They're not putting up with it and they're moving on. And then they blame them for quiet quitting and make up all these other things to kind of blame the worker. But I think most people genuinely want to do the work, want to have fulfilling work, and want to help the company make a profit because that's why they pay you. But the other side are just taking, and we need to change that culture.
Okay. I want to thank you, panelists, for your thoughts on this topic. I heard Dan mentioned and Ilya as well mentioned about managers being trained, and I'm just going to end this segment with a personal story that I've been talking about this entire segment. In that position that I was working in, my manager's manager, the top person next to the president, under the president, would come into my um, department in the morning and say, "Good morning, B word. Good morning, B words." Men and women sitting there, and I turned around and looked. It's like, why is this woman coming here calling us the B word like that? Everybody took it. Some people even laughed. And I thought that was totally unprofessional. And well, Mr. Gibbs being Mr. Gibbs, I said something about it. And, the target on my back just became bigger as a result of that. And then, as people are in a toxic environment, employees, they will start talking, gossiping, you know, spreading words, some true, some not true. And that gossip got back to that manager that came in and called us the B word. And she came in again and told us, if you don't like it, I'm paraphrasing, if you don't like it here, you can leave. To the point that my two team leads took the words that she said, made a flyer out of it, and posted it all over the department. So everywhere we went, we would see the words, if you don't like it here, you can leave. Yes. Now, somebody took those posts, started taking those flyers down. I'm not going to say who it was, but somebody started taking them down, and it was just a bad environment. So, yes, the work contract, it is broken, but people need jobs. I also agree with what Dan said about the millennials. My hat's off to them. I think that they are not taking it. They don't have to take it. And if I had been more bold in my day when I was going through that, I would have quit too. But I had bills to pay, kids to take care of, you know, and you do what you need to do. So we're going to take a short break right now. And when we come back, we're going to have our round robin discussion, which will be led by one of our panelists. We don't know what the topic is, but it's going to be right here on Diverse Talking Heads podcast. And we are back. This is Diverse Talking Heads podcast. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs. And now we're going to move into the segment of the podcast called our round robin discussion. And it's going to be led by our panelist, Kaushal. Kaushal, take it away.
I have a controversial subject for you tonight. Pizza. There is a scandal rocking the country of Italy. In Naples, the world capital of pizza, a restaurant has introduced a variety of pizza with pineapple on it. Now, those of us who live in the Western Hemisphere are familiar with pineapple pizza, or at least have heard of it. I've tried Hawaiian pizza myself. It's okay in my opinion. But in Italy, it is very controversial. I'd like to know what my fellow panelists think. Is this a step in the right direction for Italian culture and cuisine? Or is this a blasphemy against all that is good, right, and holy? Who has something to say about this? Amy.
I love pineapple on pizza. I don't really like Hawaiian pizza, but pineapple and green pepper on pizza, absolutely delicious. We'll eat it all day long. Not Italian, not an expert on Italian culture. I could absolutely understand how, if your country is responsible for pizza, you might have some more say over the correct way to form a pizza. So I'm going to, not say that I know more than a resident of Naples or restaurant owner or something like that, but give me the pineapple on pizza all day long. I think it is absolutely amazing. People are missing out.
All right. We have one in favor of pineapple pizza, and thank you for suggesting pineapple with green pepper. I'll have to try that. Ilya, what do you think?
Kaushal, I have to laugh at that because here's the thing. You and I coming with from different background, different culture, and some of the food we have, putting it something extra, to our parents at least, would be insulting. Okay, so we don't mix it. It's just the fact. The way that the Italian makes their pizza is a little bit different than what we are used to here. They don't have like cheese all over the dough. They have them actually cut in pieces, and so it's tomatoes. Okay, and that's why for them, an idea of having it, something extra on it is insulting because the way it was prepared and pre-cooked. So I'm not against it. Pineapple, I'm actually voting for the same as Amy. I love anything with vegetables on it, especially with pineapple, not necessarily meat. Uh, but if you ever try any authentic pizza, and we actually lucky enough in here in Chicago to have quite a few in Evanston that restaurants create exactly the same in the oven, right? Almost similar, I would say, as Italian, and I only say almost because we can compare it to what they have, but it is quite close to what an original looks like. So having it something different on it, I guess for them it is insulting, and they're not into having it something new to add it, even if they tried it. But here for us, I guess it's a common thing. Kids love it, and so do adults. And I don't see that much difference having it something extra and unique that would make food taste better, which pineapple does So I'm voting for it.
Thank you, Ilya. That is a very good point that pizza in Italy is not exactly the same as what we are used to here in the US. I've not been to Italy yet, but everyone I've talked to who has been to Italy does say that pizza is not what you expect there. And another thing you reminded me of, Ilya, is that in Italian restaurants, they have a very particular way of preparing and seasoning food. And I've heard stories of people asking for salt and pepper, and the chef coming out to them and asking them, "What's wrong? Did I make a mistake? Why are you asking for additional seasoning?" It's a very good point on the culture, Ilya. And I'll have to ask you about those restaurants that serve the authentic Italian style pizza because I would like very much to try that. All right, who else would like to weigh in on this? Dan, let's hear from you.
Blasphemy, it's just the end of civilization as we know it. It must be. I mean, what has this world come to? I personally am not wouldn't want pineapple on my pizza. But that's because I just don't like the idea of the sweetness. Um, but that's a personal taste. But obviously, Italian culture is absolutely crumbling in front of our eyes.
Dan, I can always rely on you to give the apocalyptic answer there. Thank you. Although I see your point about the sweetness can be a corrupting influence. I don't like pizza that has particularly sweet sauce. Have you had pizza with sweet tomato sauce?
No, I don't
That's
like
not
it.
the way to
No.
do it. All right, Charlie, we haven't heard from you yet.
Well, this comes under the category I thought of the only permanent thing in life is change. So, I'm kind of indifferent to it. I worked in the pizza business for a number of years, delivering pizzas to drunk college students. We didn't have pineapple back then, which was a tragedy, obviously. My other concern is that I guess there's nothing much going on in Italy right now. Don't they have any concerns like about the economy or things like that, or racism or whatever, And pizza, pineapple is their big obsession right now, so I'm a little concerned there. I have a non-vote on this. Either way is fine. Eat away your
Okay,
pizza, or eat away
okay,
your pineapple.
all right, good to hear that, Dan. And while Italy obviously has their much more serious problems, I think they have a right to their passions as well. Calvin, how
Well,
about you?
I guess I'm up next, and I've never had Hawaiian pizza, okay? But I recently had a jerk chicken sandwich, a Jamaican seasoning chicken sandwich with pineapple on it. And I swear I will never eat it any other way again. It was the best tasting thing ever. I've made jerk chicken at home and then went and brought some pineapple and put the ring on the sandwich. Man, it is good. So if it can enhance something that's hot, and savory like jerk seasoning, it might do some justice to pizza. So I'm going to say that I would try it. I haven't tried it, but I'm not opposed to trying it. So I would vote yes.
All right. Thank you, Calvin. I I thank you, my fellow panelists, for this discussion, and I'm glad we had it before I've had dinner. You know what I'm going to eat tonight, don't you?
Pineapple pizza.
Enjoy.
All
Thank you. That
right.
was a fun topic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kosho. That was a lot of fun, y'all. And that's about all for this episode of Diverse Talking Heads podcast. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and we want to thank our panelists this evening. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Kosho, Ilya. Thank you for coming. Amy and Dan, thank you all. Our next topic on the next episode of Diverse Talking Heads, I'm going to give you a little teaser. We're going to talk about comedy in a diverse point of view. You're going to want to check that out. Well, that's about all, y'all, for this episode of Diverse Talking Heads podcast. I'm your man, Calvin Gibbs, and it's always important that we take 2 steps to the rear and get on out of here. Until the next episode, exit stage left.